This is our first event in the Visiting Writers Reading Series, which is sponsored by the College of Arts and Sciences and the Department of English. So today our first, so before we start, may I ask you to please turn off your cell phones or put them on silent. I need to do the same. I'll do it in a minute. No, I'm going to do it now, actually. Okay, so let me do it. I usually don't have it on, but all right. So Jericho Brown grew up in Shreveport, Louisiana, and worked as a speechwriter for the mayor of New Orleans before earning his PhD in literature and creative writing from the University of Houston. He also holds an MFA in creative writing from the University of New Orleans and graduated with a BA from Dillard University in 1998. Brown is the author of 2 books of poetry. His most recent collection, The New Testament, was described by Youssef Komuniaka as a chronicle of, quote, life and death, personal rituals and blasphemies, race and nation, the good and the bad, end quote, that illuminates, quote, scenarios of self-interrogation and near redemption, end quote. His first collection of poetry, Please, won the 2009 American Book Award. The collection has received tremendous praise since its release. Ilya Kaminsky notes, quote, his lyrics are memorable, muscular, majestic. His voice in these lines is alive, something that is quite rare in his generation of very bookish and very ironic poetics. Brown's poems are living on the page, and they give the reader that much, a sense of having been alive fully, if only for a duration of 75 pages of this volume. Indeed, Jericho Brown's first book is one of those rare things, a debut of a master poet and poet. Jericho Brown is the recipient of a Whiting Writers Award and fellowships from the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study at Harvard University and the National Endowment for the Arts. His poems have appeared in the New Republic, the New Yorker, and the Best American Poetry. His first book, Please, won the American Book Award, and his second book, The New Testament, won the Anisfield-Wolf Book Award and was named one of the best books of the year by Library Journal, Coldfront, and the Academy of American Poets. He is an associate professor in English and creative writing at Emory University in Atlanta. So, well, let's welcome Jericho Brown. So today is, I'm sitting so you won't be feeling too
yeah, please.
to feel better. But today this event is a conversation with our guest. So many of you who are taking my class had read his book, a book that he generously gave us, basically. And so you read the book, but a few of you may not really be familiar with Jericho's work. So I was asking him, I asked him if he could maybe read a couple of his poems, and so you would get from the new book, and then you would get maybe, maybe not from the new book.
Oh, do you want? I can read from the new book.
No, you can read from whichever book you
Oh,
want to
okay.
read from.
I'll just read. There's a poem I'm not going to read later today for the reading that I usually start my readings with. So, and it's because where I'm from, I always begin with prayer. So, prayer of the backhanded. Not the palm, not the pear tree switch, not the broomstick, nor the closest extension cord, not his braided belt, but God, Bless the back of my daddy's hand, which, holding nothing tightly against me and not wrapped in leather, eliminated the air between itself and my cheek. Make full this dimpled cheek, unworthy of its unfisted print, and forgive my forgetting the love of a hand hungry for reflex, a hand that took no thought of its target, like hail from a blind sky, involuntary, fast, but brutal in its bruising. Father, I bear the bridge of what might have been a broken nose. I lift to you what was a busted lip. Bless the boy who believes his best beatings lack intention, the mark of the beast. Bring back to life the son who glories in the sin of immediacy, calling it love. God, save the man whose arm, like an angel's invisible wing, may fly backward in fury, whether or not his son stands near. Help me hold in place my blazing jaw as I think to say, excuse me. Thank you.
All right, so, well, maybe I'll, since it's a conversation, I ask my students to prepare questions.
Well, good. So they're going to ask questions from out there.
They can ask questions. Maybe I could ask the first question,
Yeah.
and then that will give them a little bit
Get them
of
started.
courage.
It's sort of like being an opening act.
Yes, yes, exactly. All right, so a question that I'd like to ask is, as you participated in the Kenyan Review Conversation series, you said, "You can't love me if you don't love politically."
Mm-hmm.
Would you talk about this statement and maybe explain how you arrived to this intricate relationship between love and politics as an artist or a writer? And to, that was when you were asked to answer a question about your credo.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one little part of that credo, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to ask you if you could talk a little bit more about it.
I think over and over again we're asked to compartmentalize ourselves. And I think that is the craziest thing on the planet to have to do. In actuality, we live in one world, and we are all each one individual person. And each of us has with us these parts that people like to sort of, in order to understand us better, they want to divide these parts out. Do y'all understand what I mean? And if they can divide these parts out, they feel like they can be friendly to us because, I don't have to worry about, they can show us respect, right? Like, I don't have to worry about the fact that you are black because you have a PhD, and therefore you're not like the rest of them. I've heard things like this before, actually. To which I say, you mean like my mama? They're like, oh, no, I didn't mean it that way. And then I say, oh, you mean like my grandmother? And I think it's important for us to remember when we encounter one another that we're encountering beings who are as whole as we are. And we are encountering beings who, and it is true that race and gender and sexuality are sort of grafted upon us in certain ways, right? They're grafted upon us in certain ways, and then because they're grafted upon us, people have expectations given those things, right? But what we do know about one another is that every one of us is capable of love, and every one of us wants to be loved. Like we all like love. We all like that. That's a good feeling to have. And so if we sort of start there, I think we can sort of we can get to a place of oneness as opposed to a place of division. So when I write my poems, people often make comments about how the poems are political, or the poems have social themes, or the poems are somehow railing at something that's going on in society. But in my mind, when I write a poem, what I'm doing is I'm writing a love poem. And I really do believe that every poem is a love poem, that you don't have anything unless you start from a place of tenderness. And so that's always my goal when I'm writing. But it's also, I think, a good idea for it to be our goal when we deal with one another, right? If we just handle one another with a little bit of kindness. I mean, a little bit of kindness goes a long way. And there's, interestingly enough, though, I'm sorry, I talk a lot. But interesting, you know, but hey, they pay me to do it. Interestingly enough, that's easy to say. And that's easy to intellectually believe, right? Like everyone in this room believes that. Nobody would say, oh, I think kindness is a bad idea. Do y'all understand what I mean? Like everybody. And yet, we're not always very kind. You know? I mean, it'll be, but from the time we leave here to the time we sit down again, we will have thought some awful thought about somebody else. Do y'all understand what I mean? And we have to really, I mean, I think that's something that we just have to begin to attempt to monitor. And if we can monitor that, we could probably not worry about how Jericho Brown's poems are political, but instead be concerned about how Jericho Brown's poems are love poems. If that makes any sense to y'all. Does that answer you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think it's just important to realize, I tell my students this on the first day of every class. And it sort of, for me, it sets the tone of the class to let them know that somebody in the room has been raped. Somebody in the room has had an abortion. Somebody in the room is gay or thinking about it. Somebody in the room. Do y'all understand what I mean? And if you just really understand every room you walk into is that way, that first of all will help you understand that you ain't crazy. Because some of that y'all already said me, right? Do y'all understand what I mean? You ain't crazy. You ain't strange, right? Do y'all follow what I mean? And folks, somebody asked me this question the last time I give a reading every Thursday. Thank you, Lord. Last Thursday I gave a reading somewhere and somebody said, you know, I wanted to ask you about these subjects that you handle. They seem really deep and really private. And I think part of my problem with the way we run our world and the way we live our lives is that we pretend that the private things, which are actually quite public, are private. Do y'all understand what I'm saying? Like, there's some things that really, Muriel Rukeyser, she has a book called The Life of Poetry, which I love. Y'all should read that book. It will wear you down. She said, you know, if one woman, I'm paraphrasing, but she said if one woman were to tell the truth about her life in this country, people would just set themselves on fire. Just one. Do y'all understand what it, like, that's like, I'm like, oh my goodness. Just one woman. Her name's Muriel Rukeyser, which is R-U-K, and then it's E-Y-E, and then it's S-E-R. Muriel is M-U-R-I-E-L. Yeah. I can spell too.
Yes.
Rukeyser, R-U-K, is there, will that go up? R-U-K-E-Y-E-S-E-R. She was actually, oh, wait, so you can write on the wall?
Yeah, we can write.
That looks scary. And Rukeyser was actually a really good friend of someone you have heard of, or I hope you've heard of, named Langston Hughes. And they had a really very close friendship. And they were both poets that were thought of as these political poets. But in their minds, they weren't writing political poems. They were writing the poems of their heart. Do y'all understand what I mean? And it's really interesting that we're asked over and over again to think of interest groups or to think of politics. And I'm really not interested in thinking about that. I'd much rather think about people. Why not? And I know the answer to the why not. The why not is that we have no training for intimacy or for vulnerability. Absolutely. I mean, this is why I love poetry. I mean, those of you who have been reading my book in the class probably know this from the book, that I have no trouble with intimacy and vulnerability. Do y'all understand what I mean? I mean, but that's work, because everything that we encounter on this planet tells us not to have intimacy and not to have vulnerability. As a matter of fact, folk will look at you crazy the moment you show an ounce of vulnerability. It's as if you're doing something wrong. But that's not why we're here. We're actually, I mean, do y'all know what I'm saying? We are actually here to relate to one another. We're actually here to see one another and understand, oh, that's me. Like, that's the goal, it seems to me. Yes, sir?
Let me see if I can phrase this question properly. It kind of links back to what you're saying in this. So initially, you talked about like separating things like I have a PhD, you're black, you have a PhD, so it doesn't matter. So like, when you're, this has to do with relating to, would your alternative to that be, obviously it's not the best way to do things, be to, instead of being like, oh, his PhD doesn't matter, be like, since he's black and has a PhD, how does that move him in his poetry? Or since he's overcome struggles that, like, are you saying that we should take a perspective of the person instead of judging them from their characteristics, I guess?
Well, I just think that maybe you start with hi. Do you understand what like seriously? No. This that sounds laughable and silly, but it's actually true, right? The reason why people are getting shot in the street, right, by police officers, the reason why black people in particular, the reason why transgender women higher than anybody else, the reason why women who we don't talk about enough, the reason why black men are being shot in the street in that way is because there's an assumption that there's no hello. Like there could not possibly be an approach of hello. And yet, like, you know, when we're this big, that's what we learn. The first thing we learn is hello, and the second thing we learn is thank you. People are really excited to teach young people ta-ta. Which, I don't know why that translates thank you. Is that French for thank you? No. Ta-ta. You know, like, people are really interested in mama and dada because, you know, we're all narcissists. But, but, you know, like, right after that, it's like, say hello, say hi, you know? It's like somebody give them a piece of candy, say ta-ta. I don't know why they can't say thank you. It seems like it would be just as easy. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so I think our approach to people should be, oh, hey, you're a person. You look like you got legs and arms like me. And I don't want to believe anything about you that I am not willing to believe about myself. Do you understand? Like if that was the approach.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was saying. It's like, well, I mean, obviously, you're going to have some thoughts in your head whenever you talk to anybody. Like,
yes.
It's unignorable. But I guess to say, like, say you were going up to a transgender person, or if you were caught going up to a black person in the street, just like, I guess to put yourself in their shoes and think about, like, hey, if I was them, I would just drive down the road.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Instead of being
exactly.
like, oh, he's black. He's
yeah.
That's what I'm
yeah.
trying to say.
Or even to think, oh, I'm the one with the gun. They might be scared of me.
Yeah.
You could try that. That's how, you know, people are like looking at folks like, ooh, I'm scared of you. And it's like, you got a gun. Which how you think they feel about you? You know, it's sort of how I feel. Yes, question right here.
What I have an issue with is sometimes I live in a predominantly white neighborhood, and I get that assumption all the time that, oh, she's one of the educated ones. And I've had such issues because...
You feel like I'm not. I will twerk.
No, and every now and then I've had to pull it out, like...
Yeah.
And then they're surprised, like, oh my gosh, she's one of them. So, you know, so to speak. So, I find what irritates me the most is them telling me what my experience should be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's the biggest irritant for me. I've even lost friends over that. You don't get to tell me what my experience is or was. You don't get to tell me, well, that happened long ago. Or you can't tell me that my people didn't go through that, so why am I angry? I just declared that I was an angry black woman in class yesterday. So to speak. But yeah, that is the biggest problem for me.
Yeah.
You know? Them telling me that I shouldn't be angry. Them telling me, why should your son be scared to walk in this neighborhood at night? Like, he's such a good boy. Like, why should he be scared? Like, because black boys are dying like crazy for no reason. And
everybody thinks that their boy is a good boy, though. Even people with really bad boys. I mean, y'all don't think that y'all, I mean, y'all, maybe I'm wrong. Do y'all, I mean, y'all, some of y'all have boys. Do y'all think your boys are bad boys? I mean, if so, like, I would love to talk about that. I'm actually interested in that. Do you feel like, oh, my boy's a bad boy? Do y'all feel that way? Do y'all know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I mean? Napoleon's mama thought he was a good boy. She did. Yeah.
He accepted Jesus Christ.
Yeah, come on. I'll come back with there in a second. Come on, yeah.
Maybe coming back to your bravery, and I said this in class today, a lot of your stuff is very personal. I think it's very brave of you to put yourself out there like that, like, I can do it. No, I probably could. But was there something, was it age, was it experience, was it something like that that influenced you to be able to just throw all your business out there and have no problem with it? Like, because this is very personal stuff.
Yeah, I don't know what that's about. That's crazy, huh? Yeah, I'm just really, I don't know why. I mean, I'm glad. My mom and dad made this. I always think my parent, I was really fortunate to have a mother who could not afford childcare. And because and I say fortunate, I mean that. Because she couldn't afford childcare, she understood, I have to figure out what to do with, particularly in the summertime, what am I going to do with these kids? And so she had the bright idea of taking us to the library. And so that's where we spent our days, in the library. And this is a different time. So, now when you go to a library, the whole first floor, the first 2 floors are like computers. But at the time, not to date myself, but at the time, there was nothing in libraries but books. And I was scared of my mama, so I wasn't going to tear any of the books up. And the librarians didn't know it, but they were our babysitters. And I was scared of my mama. I wasn't going to have them say anything to my mama about me when my mama came to pick us up. And so I quite literally had the experience, and I mean at a very young age, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, of being in the library and reading these books and sort of, in a lot of ways, teaching myself to read certain books. And because I did that and experienced that, there were things that would go on outside the library that were sort of hard for me to believe or to completely understand. And I think all of that reading helped to make me a very rebellious and very strong-willed human being. And for better or worse, that's not always good, by the way. That I'm that way hasn't always been fruitful. But I think that has a lot to do with it. It has to do with the fact that the truth about what you read in a book is it's best when someone lays it down, when they take off all of the layers, all of the masks, all of the clothes, all of the skin, all of the bone, and get to the marrow. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. That's the writing I loved the most when I was a kid growing up. When I was in high school, I was reading a lot of poetry. And I was a very, very unhappy child in high school. Very, when I say unhappy, close to jumping off of buildings unhappy. But I had in books this other world in which I could exist, in which I could put myself, that was very different from what I saw around me. And so the life of my imagination, I think, has always taken precedent. I've always allowed it to be like, okay, why not? Because I really do believe that we're at choice all the time. Right? And if we're at choice at every moment, if we are indeed at choice every moment, then we can choose to go the way of our imagination. And so I think, when I write a poem, I want my poems to wear people out the way I'm worn out when I read people's poems. I don't want to write poems that are sleepy. Yeah, I don't want to write Hallmark cards. I'm not interested in it. My students get really upset with me because they write something. And this is why, by the way, this is why people don't like poetry. It has to do with that thing I was saying earlier about intimacy and vulnerability. Poetry, at its core, has to show us both the good and the bad at once. We have to, when we are dealing with a poem, also deal with complexity, right? That's why poems are written in line breaks, by the way. That's why they're in lines, right? You're taking things, you're already in a world that is fragmented. Do y'all understand what I mean? Right? Like if, I was walking down the street. I mean, for that second, you're like, what the hell is going to happen? Does that make any sense to y'all? And that's complexity, right? Just like our love, Hallmark would have us believe that there is one kind of love. But our love has shades to it. And we have to reconcile that to our lives. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm of the belief that you don't know you in love unless somebody has made you really mad. Do y'all follow what I mean? Like, and you still stick around, you probably in love, I think I think that's part of the reason why I'm interested in writing the kinds of poems that I'm interested in writing. I'm just really interested in complexity, and the only way that I can get to or get at complexity is to start with me, right? And and I'm just not perfect. I mean to be, but I'm not. So every day I have to be like, what's wrong with you today, Jericho? And then also in that same poem, what's right with you today, Jericho? Right? What are you remembering today, Jericho? Right? And what are you failing to remember today, Jericho? Do you understand what I mean? And those are the questions I ask myself when I write a poem. Does that answer you? Yeah. Okay, there was one with a blue shirt right here. Yeah. She's like, did I wear a blue shirt? That is blue, isn't it? My eyes are getting, y'all.
I had a question as far as you compartmentalizing things. I think that comes back to a person's history, the way things were passed down to them. So they tend to think the way their parents think.
Yeah.
Their grandparents thought, so they kind of think that way. And that's what makes them compartmentalize who they are or how they act. So
yeah.
I think that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it, and I also think that it's important that we take a review of it, right? Because there's some stuff that our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents and our great-great-grandparents gave us that we need to hold on to forever, and I believe that. I am so grateful. But there's other stuff that we can let go. I want to say, let me just say this about the first part of what I'm saying. I really do believe that all those people who I never knew, who I was reading in those libraries, people like Muriel Rukeyser and Langston Hughes, I believe those people are with me in some way, if only through their words, right? And because of my imagination, I can sort of believe that they're with me in a really big, with me, like go Jericho, go, kind of a way. Do you understand what I mean? But I can also read things that even those people wrote and say, I don't know about that. Is that useful for me? Do I need to make that choice? So that's
My parents used to have us read encyclopedias. We're little, we write papers at home, and at school just pick a topic and a book, and then pick something out and then write about it. So you have good writing skills.
Yeah.
So would you say in today's society, looking on today's society, are you saying that we're beginning to teach our children some traditions of the past, or do we need to reiterate that more, looking at the society today?
I think everybody is doing the best that they can possibly do with their children. I know people want me, people really want me to be Bill Cosby, and I'm not. I'm just not. I just don't have this feeling that there are these mothers who are having these kids that they don't want, and they so mean to them. And I just think that everybody is doing the best when it comes to people's children, everybody is doing the best that they can possibly do. And people want the best for it. People are getting upset with people for buying their kids shoes that cost this or that amount of money. You know what I mean? But that's what parents do. They try to give their kids everything, even the stuff their kids ought not have. Right? Just that's what kids do. They ask for everything, including stuff they ought not have. I don't have any kids, so I pretend to know how to raise any. And I'm not here to pretend to know how to raise any. I'm not interested. Y'all welcome to it. Please, no, please. The more kids you have, the more I know you having a good time. There's proof of your good time. I know at least one day you had a good time. For every kid you have, I know you haven't had it. Please go about it. You are welcome to it. But I think what happens in culture cannot be erased, right? And I think there are a lot of people who are interested in erasing culture. I don't think they do that consciously. There are a lot of people who are interested in commodifying culture, like turning culture into something to be sold, right? There are a lot of, but I don't think you can erase those things, right? But I do think that individually, we can decide how expansive we want to be. And so what I mean by that is, whatever I do, I'm going to do blackly, whether I like it or not. Like there's not really a way around that for me. But that doesn't mean that there are black things. Does that make any sense? That doesn't mean that I can't go bird watching. Do y'all understand what I'm saying? That doesn't mean that I can't do any myriad of things that people are not prepared or willing to associate with the black experience. Do y'all understand what I mean? And I think if we sort of just remember that for ourselves and for our kids and for whomever else, everything else will fall in line, right? That the world is still, whatever you do, you are welcome to do it. If you want to make a trip to Alaska, I don't know why you want to make a trip to Alaska. It's cold all the time. But sometimes the sun shines for 20 hours straight, but that's your business. If you want to make a trip to Alaska, I have a very good friend, and we're always, he's from Milledgeville, and he's a black man, and he lives in Alaska. And so that's why I'm thinking about my friend Sean in particular. And he's always just made these decisions that his mom and dad are like, what are you doing? So he'll up and, he'll be like, I want to live in Barcelona. So he'll go move to Barcelona. Right? And he's open to that. And he believes that there's possibility there and there's experience there. And he's willing to take care of himself. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's the thing that we have to sort of remember to support, right? That things are much more expansive than what we often allow them to be or want to believe that they are. There's a question right here. Thank you. There's a question right here.
Yes, I thought your book was autobiography of your life, and I advise to know what happened to Angel.
What happened to Angel?
And also, did your mom ever get along with Angel?
I know, right? That's funny. That's funny. So I hate to break your heart.
Okay.
I really do. I hate to break your heart. But Angel is not real. I try to, there's a poem in the book called Make Believe. There's a poem in the book called Make Believe where I try to explain that part of what I'm doing is trying to create what I think of as a myth, what I think of as an allegory in the book. So, but let me be clear about this. I haven't read a book that I don't think of as autobiographical.
Right.
Because every book shows you what somebody's looking at. And I am looking at, in both of my books, I am looking at domestic violence. I am looking at what happens when we introduce violence into a love relationship. What happens? Because I'm like confused by it. And obviously I haven't gotten over it because I've written about it for 2 straight books, right? My mother and father, who are together today and have been together from the day they laid eyes on each other and have been together since, right? My mom and dad, they just like to beat each other up. And I particularly think that's crazy if I'm around. Like when I was a kid, I'm like, golly, I'm trying to sleep. Y'all throwing things? And do you understand what I mean?
Yes.
Right?
I really thought
And
she's a real person only because you dedicated this book to your brother.
Yeah, I dedicate the book to Messiah, who's actually my cousin, but was raised in my house for a period of time as my brother. Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. So, yeah, and Messiah's, he's funny. I miss Messiah. Messiah really is gone. Messiah died a few years ago while I was living in San Diego. And he was sort of the inspiration. He's actually where the book comes from. I really wanted to write a book for him and for having missed his funeral. And I felt like I had written a first book that he didn't even know about. And I wanted to write a book that I could sort of send in his direction that would be about the things that I know Messiah was interested in. Right. So that's where my head went there. Does that make sense? Thank you. Y'all are so nice. Thank you. Can I go up here and then I'll come back down? Yeah.
Is your placement of the poems, like you put the first one first and the last one last, is the order, did you have a meaning to that?
Yeah, I always put the poems, I try to put the poems in an order that creates an arc like that of a novel. So you know how you read, although it's not a novel, right? It's not a story in that same way. I do like to create moments of suspense and climax and surprise and sort of reveals that we come across in novels. So I don't know how, like, if you
progression.
Exactly, okay. Right. But that progression for me is not about chronology, though. The novels I'm interested in are not really novels about chronology either. I mean, if we really think about a novel like, if we think about Toni Morrison's Beloved, for instance, right? Most of the story of what happens way back somewhere when. But in the present tense of the novel, they're living at 124 now. They're living in an address, and then the ghost comes back. And because the ghost of Beloved comes back, she starts having all these memories from having been a slave. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I'm interested in how I can change structures, how I can sort of trick out that sort of the obvious ideas we have about chronology, where we go forward and then we sort of step back and then we go forward. And I'm interested in how I can do that with poems. I'm actually working on a play right now. And doing that sort of opens up opportunities for me to think about narrative in a very different way from what I've ever thought about it before. Because in poems, it's sort of like you put this here, you put this here, then you put this here, then you put this here. And with on stage, you can have two things happen at the same time. And so there's a certain kind of simultaneity to narrative that I really want to get after, right? That we sort of enact our memories in the present, right? That sometimes when we do things, we're doing things because we're in the moment of the past. We're thinking completely about the past when we make certain decisions that we make instead of thinking about now. Right? So I really want to make that happen on stage. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah. Down here. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. I'm catching a media personality. I have two questions for you. My first question is, like 2 questions ago, you said you do all things blackly. How exactly do you define blackly? And my second question is, what poem have you written that evoked the most emotion?
Yeah, I don't define blackly, and that's sort of my point, right? That if I am black, then then what I do is black. That's so. So I guess that, I mean, if I had.
Basically, you saying what you do doesn't necessarily make you. It's not a black way of doing things. You're just being human.
Yeah. Well, no. No, that's not what I'm saying. I do think I'm just being human. I'll agree with that. But I also think that, like, I'm really not interested in an acceptance based on. No. No, let me talk. Y'all be patient. I'm doing this. So there's sort of this idea that floats around, right? That in order to love one another, we have to get beyond, right? Like this idea that when I see this other person, I don't see color. And I'm like, why not? I really do feel that way. I know y'all have been trained to think that like seeing color is a bad idea. But I'm like, what's wrong with color? I actually think it's really a good idea to notice, like they're all here for a reason. They all must contribute to something, right? And so if they all contribute to something, I'm much more after the something they contribute to, if that makes any sense. Do you understand that? So I'm just not interested in erasure. I'm interested in diversity. I'm interested in inclusivity. But I'm not interested in everybody pretending ain't nobody got no history, no past, no culture, no ethnicity, no race. I just don't believe it. It's not true. It's okay. It's okay. I mean, do y'all understand what I'm saying? Like, I think that's okay. The real question is, I mean, for me, maybe not for y'all, the real question is, can I love you because you are Muslim? Can I love you because you are Christian? Can I love you because you are gay? Right now, we're living in a world that tells us, can I love you in spite of the fact that you are blank? Do y'all understand what I mean?
Yeah, I think it deals with your level of understanding another person.
Yeah. Now, what was the second question? I done forgot it.
The second question was, out of all the poems you've written, which one evoked the most emotion?
Oh, I don't know. They're like kids, and they're like kids that grow up, and sometimes, they grow up and they go away. Sometimes they call home, and sometimes they don't. So I don't, it would be hard for me to choose one. I always feel closest to the one I'm working on. Like I feel closest to the last, I'll read the last poem that I wrote at the reading today. Or the last poem I think is finished or close to finished. There are other poems I'm working on, but I feel closest to the poems I'm working on, but I guess I feel closest to the poems I'm working on because mothers feel closest to their babies who they need to feel close to at that moment, right? They have a need for them. Your infant has a need for you that your 10-year-old does not. That's not to say that your 10-year-old doesn't need you, but the need is quite different, right? And the vulnerability of your 10-year-old is different from the vulnerability of your infant, right? Do you understand what I mean? So the poems that I'm working on now are probably the poems I'm closest to, and I'm not working on enough poems now because I'm working on a play. So I'm sort of I'm shifting genres in this moment. So does that answer you?
Yes, it answers my question. So the other question is, if you could only share one of your poems besides the one that you're working on now, which poem would you share for the rest of your life and why? That's a question.
That's the last.
Huh. That is hard. Do you have an answer to this? You're up here. It's actually a good question, though.
It's a good question.
And I'll tell you why it's a good question. Can I talk about this a little bit? It's a good question because often, I mean, that's actually what happens, right? So we're going to have to die. And then we do. Like, I'm sorry. I know that comes as a huge surprise to all of you. Y'all kill me. Y'all watch How to Get Away with Murder every week, but y'all don't want to believe you got to die. Y'all are hilarious. But the way people sort of come to poetry is through anthologies. And when you come to people's poem in an anthology, it's not like you come to, a book, right? You come to a poem, right? It'll say Sylvia Plath, Lady Lazarus, and that'll be it sometimes, you know what I mean? I mean, often the only poem by Robert Hayden that's in an anthology is Those Winter Sundays. And that poem has to sort of stand for everything Robert Hayden wrote all these books, and or Elizabeth Bishop, right? It's always One Art or The Fish, right? So it's an interesting question, but it's a question I guess I wouldn't want to. It's a question I wouldn't want to answer. I would hope that readers can answer that for me. I would hope that readers make it clear, okay, do you know what I mean? We need that. We need that poem, and we need it all the time, and we need it forever. So it's really hard for me to answer.
It's okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Why the New Testament?
Why call it that?
Well, from you coming in, you talked about the
The practitioner.
The practitioner. So clearly, you're a church-going kind of guy.
Hallelujah.
So I'm sure this caused a ruckus with some church members.
Yeah, not really.
Not really?
No, because I don't really, I mean, people, I don't really talk about stuff in real life. Like, it's so funny. I do, like, everybody at my church knows I'm a poet, and if they want the book, they're welcome to, Google me and go buy the book. Like, but,
So it's not one of those saved and sanctified.
Well, they talk about Jesus a lot, but they're not, where I go to church, they talk about Jesus a whole lot. They love them some Jesus, my Lord. I do too. I think Jesus is the bomb. I know y'all was ready. They. But, just as much, they'll read about the Tao. They'll read from the Quran. We do a whole bunch of stuff at my church that isn't necessarily always happening at every church. Calling the book the New Testament has to do with the fact that, so can I say this thing that I think is really weird about me? I have this belief about poetry and how to like get it done. And I have this idea that one way to get it done, that you have to. So y'all may have figured out if you read any of my work that I'm really interested in old school music. Like, and when I say old school, I mean really old. Like I'm a big Sam Cooke fan. I'm a big Donny Hathaway fan. I like some new stuff, but I just can't get over folks just like singing and missing notes and leaving it on the recording. I love that. Y'all know that's fly to me. But so I have this idea that all of those people, like if you think of Nat King Cole, do y'all know who Nat King Cole is? You might not actually, now that I think about it, but you sort of get an image for Nat King Cole as a guy. He might have a cigarette, he might be behind a piano, he's always wearing a suit, he's dark skinned, he's got that sort of like comp going down. Right, perm down, yes, slick to the side, right? And there's a voice that sort of comes in your mind that goes along with that. Or if you think of Patti LaBelle, which I'm sure y'all have heard of, right? You probably think of somebody hollering at the top of her lungs and rolling around on the floor. Or if you think of Diana Ross, you probably think of somebody whispering and throwing her arms up in the air, like that whisper did something. Do y'all understand what I mean? And so I'm sort of interested in how people push a performance forward into our memories, right? And so then they begin, so that performance that we see over and over again is like who they are, right? And so the title of the book sort of came in this way where I was like, it has to go all the way, right? Like if you're Diana Ross, you don't just do this. If you're Diana Ross, you do this. Do y'all understand what I mean? And if you're Patti LaBelle, you don't just lean down. You don't just bend over. You roll. Y'all have never seen Patti LaBelle roll. Because y'all looking at me strange, like roll. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, she used to throw that microphone. She don't do that anymore. Patti LaBelle would sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and on that last note, she would do a spin in a circle, holding that last note and throw that microphone stand. And I used to think that woman was somebody strong. Y'all know how heavy a microphone stand is? My God, that's a strong woman. Anyway, and so I called it the New Testament because I saw myself making references to the Bible so often in the book. And so I wanted to do something that pressed that all the way home, right? And I'm also interested in the book standing as a tome all on its own, the way we think about that. And I like words that can have more than one meaning. So my first book, for instance, is called Please. And I like the fact that the word please itself is a word that, given its inflection, can mean very different things, Do y'all understand what I mean? Like please can actually mean shut up. Isn't that amazing? Like I'm fascinated by that. Right? If I say please the right way, like if I put the right word in front of please, and then I say please, then that just means shut up. Right? And if I say it another way, it means give me some. And if I say it another way, it means I cannot believe this is happening to me. Do y'all understand? Like it's the same word. That's just please. That's not even a cuss word. Like we know this about cuss words, but I'm really fascinated by the fact that this word is not even a cuss word can do that. And so I'm interested in a word like putting the New Testament all together outside of its biblical reference. What meanings could it possibly have? So that's where it came from. Does that answer? Okay, you have another question, but you didn't ask the last, so I'm going to come back to you. Plus, your questions be hard. Yeah, Scarf, right here, yes.
I have two questions. The first one, is your church in Atlanta?
Yeah, I go to I'm sorry, I'll talk about it, yeah. So I go to the Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta, where Reverend David Alt is the senior minister. It's a science of mind or New Thought church. Many of these churches were founded in the 1800s. At their root, sort of the person who's often thought of as a progenitor of the science of mind is a man named Ralph Waldo Emerson. Who you may have heard of. He's a writer. So he's like, yeah, Emerson. Actually, it's interesting. One of my favorite poets, a woman named Sharon Olds, who I think you all should read, Olds. I think she's really a great poet. I have questions about her line breaks, but I think she's good. I do. I have questions about Beyonce's upper register too, but we can talk about that later. No, I mean I think it's you can like somebody a lot and still like have questions. Do y'all know what I mean? But like y'all don't allow for that no more. If you like somebody, you got to stand. And you got to be like, no, perfection, no. And I'm like, no, it's just like the upper register. That's all. But anyway, I'm sorry. Back. So and the church was actually founded by a man named Ernest Holmes, but there are many churches like it. A church that many of you have heard of that is similar to it is called Hillside, yes, which is in Cascade, I think. And I can't remember. Her name is Barbara King. Barbara King is the pastor at that church. So that's where I go to church. And ultimately, their church is based on the fact that God is everywhere, right? And they take that quite literally. And that it then becomes our decision to do two things. One thing is to understand if we believe that God is indeed everywhere. I'm sorry if I'm making y'all uncomfortable. People don't like to talk about the Lord. And I'm sorry, I really am sorry, but she asked, and that's the only reason I'm answering. I'm not trying to be like that way. I know y'all ain't like Hail Mary of school of religion or nothing. I'm just going to do this real quick though. If we indeed believe that God is everywhere, then we have to believe that God is in me and in everyone I meet. Isn't that something? But we really like to make exceptions for that, right? I mean, the truth about how we actually live our lives is that we live our lives as if we are unworthy, and we say things about ourselves. I mean, just think about some of the awful things you said about yourself today. We say things about ourselves that, if you ain't willing to say it about God, you ought not be saying it about yourself. Do you understand what I'm saying? So that's like the first thing. And then the second thing is, if I understand that God is everywhere, then that means that I have to understand that if I understand that God is everywhere, I have to understand that God is in every situation I see, everything I perceive, that somehow or another God is in it. And sometimes you get to look real hard, but you have to sort of trust and have faith that God is in it. So that's it.
And then my second question was, you were talking about how everybody needs love and things like that, and I feel like a lot of times who we are, when we get so close to other people, they kind of become a little part of us. So as far as you making yourself vulnerable through your poems and, stuff like that, I know that you tell a lot of stories about people, that are in your life. Do you feel like that's kind of difficult sometimes, or does it mess with your relationships with them?
Is it difficult for me to tell stories about people who are in my life?
Yeah,
No, I sit around hoping for stories about people in my life. Like, Lord, please give me a story. I will take a story anywhere I can. I will take a poem from anywhere I can get it. I don't really. So I think what you're asking me is, particularly when it comes to, okay, so for instance, like in my first book, maybe this doesn't happen as much in my second book, but like in my first book, I talk about my dad a lot. And my dad my dad, bless his heart, that's a mean old bastard. He's so mean. I'm like, why are you so crotchety? Like, get your life together. Oh my God, why are you so mean? And he just is, and I just be like, oh my God, Daddy, really? And I'll tell him now, I'm like, Dad, do you have to be so mean though? Like, come on, it's a beautiful day. And he'll be like, it's gonna rain. And I'll be like, there ain't no clouds in the sky. He'll be like, the rain coming. It's got to rain sooner or later. I'm like, but why don't we just enjoy the beautiful day? Sure, it's gonna rain, you're right. But what about today? He'll be like, yeah, but you get ready for this rain. Do you understand what I mean? So I write about him, and sometimes some of the things that I write about him aren't necessarily flattering, but they're true. And if he wanted a different depiction, then he ought to act different. Do you know what I mean? Like if people are upset with you about how you, I do think it's important for us to tell the truth. Right? But I also think that, it's not for me, it's just not my responsibility. Like, if you want me to write poems about how good and sweet you are, then be good and sweet. All of y'all need to remember, this is actually a good time for you to know, all your children are going to be writers. Actually, all your children are going to make movies. It'll be worse. People will actually see. And they're going to make movies about how you treat them. So now we just fixed all of that. Yeah, back here, sweater. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, that sweater. Okay. I'm sorry, I was over. Yeah, it's fine. You can go first and shoot. I think we have time. We seem to have.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. Okay, this kind of goes back to the previous topic of family and generation stuff. That kind of goes to this too. So from your perspective, how do you take sort of a mixed legacy? Like, let's say a person who might be dead, who might be like, say, my grandfather, who, has their points, but while we're being raw about this, would have had no qualms about shooting someone like you.
Yeah.
How do you, just, at least from my perspective, like, how do you take that? Can you just sort of like disown them from the family, like, I'm not like that anymore? Or, you still like just take part of them, half of them?
No.
Like you said, like, God, everybody, but,
No, you do better than what you know.
Yeah.
Right? But that doesn't mean that there's anybody on this planet that you need to be worried about not loving. You need to just, you forgive them. You forgive yourself for not having forgiven them, and you do what you know is best, right? And don't take them around no black people, because they could get beat up. No, I'm just saying. No, do y'all understand what I'm saying? Like, I just think it's a good idea to take responsibility. A few weeks ago, we celebrated the anniversary of when women were given. Given seems an odd word here, but I'll use it because I'm missing words right now. Given the right to vote, and I was just like, the Library of Congress sent out this tweet about it, and I just tweeted back, "You mean white women?" And they were like, and I was cool. Like, I'm not tripping. I just want you to be honest about the fact that the women that were given the right to vote were white women, and that was it. Do you understand? If you were any other kind of woman that had been raced, as this country likes to race people, then you couldn't vote, and that's cool. That's just the way life was, and moving right along. It's not cool. It shouldn't have been that way, but we have to accept that but you got to be honest about these things, right? And that goes back to what I was saying about the because of, right? right? We still haven't gotten to, we're doing in spite ofs, we're lumping people, we're like do the because of instead of the in spite of.
Even if they're racist, you say I love you because you're racist.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's interesting. Well, that's interesting. That's interesting because, you know, what I'm learning is that when you come in contact with, I mean, you do love all of, you do, I mean, we do. Y'all can act like you don't. But the truth is we do love the experiences that we've been through that were harmful experiences. We love, because like, we wouldn't be past those harmful experiences. We wouldn't know how to handle those experiences again. We wouldn't, in some cases, be better people. Do y'all understand what I mean? So yeah, sure, I love you because you're racist. Right? You racist. I love you because that's going to teach me something I imagine. You acting a fool, I guess I can get something out of you acting a fool. Do you understand what I'm saying? But it's hard. Yeah, I agree.
It can maybe affect your behavior.
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't have to affect my behavior. Yeah. And then there was a question right here to the right. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about how other artists had voices, had a voice like the famous artists or songwriters and stuff. So I was wondering, what would you define as your main voice?
I don't know the answer to that. In terms of voice, what I try to do in my poems is I try to call out to something that is both contemporary and classical at the same time. And when I say classical, I really do mean classical probably in the Greek sense of classical, which I actually have a lot of shame about. But I also, I shouldn't say have shame about, which I am torn about, right? I try to call to that through the poems that I make, but I try to make use of a very contemporary and what might be thought of as a very black vernacular, a very Southern vernacular in my poems. And so that's the most that I can say about that, right? I want to make the poems. I really like poems that sound. This is interesting. I like for poems to be just above speaking language. I don't think poems are the same as, I was walking down the street with my dog, and I don't think that's the exact same language of a poem. But I do think there's something about poems where it's like right above that. Have y'all ever seen Angels in America? If you haven't, I think it's a good idea. It's a really good example of using vernacular language, I think. Using the vernacular, but sort of like exploding and exploiting it so that it rises above itself. So I'm really interested in that, in poems. Should I take this last question? I'll answer it fast, I promise. Okay.
Well, this question isn't as beautiful as you think. Earlier you mentioned that the church you go to explores different religious texts. So I was wondering, are those readings like you reading from the Quran or reading from these different things, do you feel as though it brings you closer to your faith and makes you believe even more?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's actually comforting to know that we have way more in common than what we're often willing to believe. And I think that's a good place to stop. Thank y'all so much for coming. Thank you.